Hello, my friend. It's Gina. Thank you for continuing the long journey in the effort to find justice for Elizabeth. This is an account that's based on a true story, one that, as of this recording, remains ongoing. Welcome back to Lost Sister, a Discarded Woman, Episode 8. Content warning: this and future episodes contain sensitive topics and may cause distress to some listeners. Hearing disturbing actions of oppression, manipulation, and abuse can bring up painful memories, personal struggles, and trauma for many. Narrator's note: the names have been changed and places are purposefully arbitrary to protect the privacy of those involved. This podcast is our way of telling Catherine and Elizabeth's story so that others can be aware of potential future issues. The central figures in our story include Catherine, her sister Elizabeth, Elizabeth's husband Walter, and Walter's granddaughter Darcy. Additional figures: Alex, Elizabeth's family attorney, and Sam, the assistant county attorney. Let's recap. In episode 7, we covered the family court hearing that could have cost Elizabeth's family dearly due to Darcy's guardianship challenge. Thankfully, the judge did not change the current guardianship status. We reflected on the family court hearing where Catherine was appointed guardian when the judge asked Sam if the county attorney's office would be investigating the wrongdoings in this case, and Sam answered in the affirmative. There are still questions regarding the county attorney. Are they willfully blocking the subpoena request from the detective and Sam? Or is it the fact that this official is naive and inexperienced? Catherine has now contacted the county attorney, the district attorney, the state attorney, the Secretary of State, every single one with the same excuses of not enough manpower, not enough bandwidth. Several more key findings by the detective were disclosed, such as the fact that Darcy paid cash for her property and the several 911 call-outs to Walter's house, which the detective himself was witness to at least a couple of those call-outs, and remembered Walter vividly. Now, to continue our story. It's interesting to note that until the latest hearing, Darcy had been very active on social media, freely sharing that she has been furnishing the house, almost flaunting the fact that she's spending an enormous amount of money, including the fact that Darcy purchased a couple of large expensive vehicles. And of course, it's a big house, well over 4,000 square feet. Someone that Elizabeth's family knows well ends up driving by Darcy's property from time to time, and the family's been told that suddenly there's a lot of activity, lots of landscaping, and the drive up to the house is now fenced and gated. Sure seems to be really easy spending newly acquired money, doesn't it? The attorney Alex stays in touch with the family on a regular basis, and the news that Darcy has engaged yet another attorney, this time from out of town, wasn't unexpected. Even though the change has no overall effect on any of the current and potential future proceedings, Alex is acquainted with the new attorney and feels that maybe this time Darcy's choice just might work in Elizabeth's favor. This attorney is well known for their open and fair dialogue with other attorneys. Now, there's still a little curiosity about whether Darcy is just adding attorneys to her payroll, firing one or more before moving on, or is she the one systemically being fired? Now, the latest report from the very determined detective continues to unearth more and more information. But perhaps the biggest bombshell was the discovery that Walter's only child, who would be Darcy's father, is not dead. Not only is he alive, but it appears that he has lived in the same area as Darcy his entire life. Elizabeth's family had been told, since Walter and Elizabeth were married, that Walter's son died, very tragically, around the age of 20 in a traffic accident. Now, of course, no one ever had cause to challenge that statement. It's not the type of thing that anyone with manners would ever bring up again. And with Elizabeth's current memory status, she's not really able to accurately answer if she was ever aware that the son is alive. I find it interesting that Elizabeth has not mentioned Walter to anyone in the family, not once, since she learned that he died. And regardless of whether Elizabeth ever knew about the son, Walter must have known. He eventually accepted Darcy as his unknown grandchild just a few years earlier. Did he just wash his hands of his son? Was he ever a part of his life? Did he lie to Elizabeth from the start? Or did he threaten her to stay quiet about the son? At the time they met, divorce wasn't well received, but abandoning a child was unforgivable. Not only is Walter's son alive, but the reason the detective discovered his existence in the first place is because he's got a very long arrest record. And regardless of his history, the son is Walter's closest heir after his wife Elizabeth, of course. However, it was discovered that Walter's son had been specifically excluded, the same as his wife Elizabeth, from the last will Walter signed. It's very much worthy of note. Walter signed that will less than a week after Elizabeth was admitted to the hospital, which was also when the hospital recorded the statement from Darcy that neither Elizabeth nor Walter was capable of making decisions. And if you remember, Walter moved all of Elizabeth's assets to his own account the day after Elizabeth was admitted to the hospital, then bypassed both his living wife and his living son in his will, leaving everything to Darcy. There's just nothing right about this, folks. Yet here we are, with almost no one in the justice system willing to do anything about it, with the exception of Alex, Sam, and this detective. Catherine had also reached out to the federal district attorney, who themselves returned Catherine's message late. Luckily, Catherine had also included some of the specifics within the case, so they were able to discuss it thoroughly during the call. Of course, they admit that this type of case just isn't something their offices handles. However, the good news was that this particular office confirmed what many of us had already determined for ourselves, that obviously what is going on is indeed a crime. Nevertheless, according to that office, Catherine was told that it feels more like fraud, and they encouraged Catherine to reach out to the FBI with fraud in mind this time, which would mean an entire new set of information and an entire new set of paperwork would need to be submitted. They also indicated that their office would be available if an agent is appointed and wanted to discuss the case. With newfound determination, Catherine and the detective reach out in tandem to the FBI. Maybe, just maybe, there is still hope for some kind of justice. And once again, patience is needed. Lots and lots of patience. There are 5 W's in criminal justice. Where, what, who, when, and why. There are also 5 decision points in the criminal justice system: investigation, arrest, trial, sentencing, and corrections. At each stage, there are legal processes and protections in place to ensure justice and fairness. The decision to prosecute a case is based on whether the evidence is sufficient, the seriousness of the offense, and the size of the court's caseload. Factors that influence a prosecutor's decision to charge include the suspect's background and their criminal past, if any. Did the offense result in harm? Will the punishment fit the crime? Did the police act with bias or engage in improper conduct? And the victim's wishes or motives. On average, county attorney offices in America handle about 2,000 cases a year. The types of cases are wildly varied, from representing the county government to issuing emergency protective orders, handling extraditions to prosecuting criminal law, including misdemeanors, domestic violence cases, and elder fraud. You know, seniors lose millions of dollars every year because of elder fraud. The FBI reported an 11% increase in just 2023. And that's just the reported cases. Some senior citizens have no idea they've been scammed, or they're too ashamed or embarrassed or even afraid to report it. Which brings me to today's lecture. For all of us, to avoid fraud, review financial statements regularly, shred any personal information, and avoid clicking links from unknown email accounts. Many people, me included, have stopped answering phone calls from numbers that we don't recognize. Not only is it okay to not answer, but it's also okay to hang up. The FBI advises that if you are being contacted by people that you don't know and things start to look a little off, make you feel uncomfortable, stop. Take a breath. Call someone, like a family friend or a family member, or even the FBI. So all of this sounds promising for actual justice, right? Sorry to burst that bubble, but it's all about numbers, folks, particularly the numbers counting money. The issues start with the way cases are prioritized. For example, the easiest cases to prosecute are individuals who either have a record or those who have little to no money to defend themselves. The police and or the prosecutor's offices will more than likely tell the defendant that they can just plead to a lesser offense and either receive a lesser sentence, perform community service, or maybe even just pay a fine. It means the police and the prosecutor's office spend much less resources, meaning money, which both entities can and will tout higher conviction rates. When the number of convictions rise, there will be higher budgets and grants. It's just the way it is. It's a vicious cycle. Higher conviction rates equal more money in the budgets of the police and the prosecutor's offices, which in turn means more low-hanging fruit prosecutions and therefore more convictions. You know, the county attorney who could help get justice for Elizabeth made an announcement that in a 6-month time period, their office prosecuted 400 domestic and sexual abuse cases, which is fantastic. Applaud that. Absolutely. All types of abuse should be investigated. Our hope is that someday soon, someone will extend that same enthusiasm into elder fraud. Just a little more. Unfortunately, at this point, Elizabeth's case is deemed to be too involved to prosecute. Yeah, it makes me sick to think how many other serious crimes that are not pursued because of the not enough bandwidth excuse. There are still so many unanswered questions surrounding Walter's death. Catherine was thinking maybe there's one way to learn a little bit more, and it would be to request his death certificate, which she did from the state. However, the request went unfulfilled for months. After inquiring why, she was told the state didn't have a death certificate under that name. Okay, that's weird. But then someone in that department suggested that Catherine try a border state. And so, back to the drawing board. Since each state handles death certificate requests differently, first she tried the nearest state. After several attempts to find the information, again without success, she tried another tact. Since each state handles death certificate requests differently, she tried the nearest state first. After several attempts to find the information, again without success, she decided to try another tact. If you recall from an earlier episode, Catherine had learned about Walter's death from the staff at Elizabeth's care home quite some time after he had died. There had been no obituary. There was no funeral. But during Darcy's now infamous phone call, Darcy herself had mentioned to Catherine that she had had him cremated per his verbal request. So, that meant there had to be a facility that handled the cremation, which leads Catherine back to the phones, calling every funeral home in the area, one by one. After many phone calls, bingo! The eventual answer on the other end was, why, yes. And I remember that one in particular. And I've often wondered why no one in the family has asked for the death certificate. Catherine couldn't believe what she was hearing. So she asked, does that mean that you, dear lady, actually have it? Do you have the death certificate? The answer was, of course. She could hear the papers rustling. Yes, here it is, right here. And since your family is guardian of Walter's spouse, I can send it over to you. If it's okay, I'll email it to you right away. Wow! Something that Catherine was beginning to think would be another dead end. Instead, moments later, she was looking at Walter's death certificate. And incredibly, the cause of death was not what she expected to see. Join us soon for episode 9, Lost Sister, a Discarded Woman, where a totally new revelation unfolds that you do not want to miss. Abuse in all forms is an equal opportunity instrument of control, regardless of age, gender, IQ, education, or socioeconomic status. Whatever your age, for your own sake and those who care about you, please establish a living will. Keep it somewhere that your chosen caretaker can access it. And if you have assets and you don't have them in order, make plans right now to do so. Talk to an attorney and or an investment institution that you trust and make it happen before it's too late. The terms elder abuse, elder neglect, and elder fraud are relatively new. In general, elder abuse is a term referring to any knowing, intentional, or neglectful act by a caretaker or any other person that causes harm or a serious risk of harm to a vulnerable elderly person. Legislators in all 50 states have passed some form of elder abuse prevention laws. A good place to start for more information is the website justice.gov/elderjustice. And if you suspect elder abuse, there is help. The National Elder Fraud Hotline is 1-833-FRAUD-11. That's 833-372-8311. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 800-799-7233. These links and phone numbers are also located on the Lost Sister webpage, lostsister.buzzsprout.com. I hope you continue following us as Elizabeth's family continue the struggle to help her in Lost Sister, a Discarded Woman. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, and share with your family and friends. By gaining a wider audience, we hope to bring attention to not only Elizabeth and Catherine's story, but to shine an enormous light on all domestic abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence, and elder fraud. More must be done to protect the vulnerable in our society. The hope is by sharing Elizabeth and Catherine's story that it might help others to avoid the same happening to them or someone they love. Thank you.